Florence Griffith Joyner, the Olympic legend who still holds world records in both the 100-meter and 200-meter dashes, died suddenly at just 38 years old. But just recently, disturbing new details have come to light, straight from her autopsy report, and let me tell you, it's raising way more questions than it answers. Grab a seat because the deeper we go into Flo Jo's autopsy findings, the more you'll realize, this story was never over. It was just covered up. Stay with me. This is going to be one of the most important stories you hear today. Autopsy confirms Florence Griffith Joyner died from seizure-induced asphyxiation. Florence Griffith Joyner, or as the world called her, Flo Jo, the fastest woman alive, that vibrant, beautiful, unstoppable force on the track, just gone, just like that. And for years, people were left with nothing but confusion, rumors, and whispers about what really happened. Like, how does someone who seemed to be the picture of health, someone who literally flew on the track with all that strength and grace, die in her sleep at just 38? It didn't make sense. And you know how it goes. When something doesn't make sense, people start filling in the blanks with gossip, with wild guesses, and with a lot of unfair assumptions. But now? The official autopsy finally gave us the real story. And let me tell you, it's both heartbreaking and oddly peaceful at the same time. So here's what the medical experts found, and honestly, it's so sad because it all sounds so quiet, so accidental. Flo Jo died from something called positional asphyxia, which basically means she suffocated because of the way her body was positioned during an epileptic seizure. Can you believe that? It wasn't harmful substance. It wasn't heart failure. It wasn't anything scandalous like some people tried to suggest. She simply had a seizure in her sleep, and the way her body reacted, her limbs stiffened, her head turned just the wrong way, and she ended up on her stomach, cut off her breathing. Just like that. What really happened to the fastest woman on Earth? We all knew Florence Griffith Joyner for her speed, her style, and her smile, but no one expected this. New details from her autopsy are not just surprising, they're disturbing. What was hiding beneath the surface? Why are experts now asking questions all over again? Stick around to the very end because the last revelation will absolutely stop you in your tracks. Dr. Richard Fukumoto, the chief forensic pathologist, put it in plain English, she suffocated. And doesn't that just send a chill down your spine? Like, something so small, something that could happen in such a quiet moment while you're tucked in bed. And apparently, it all happened pretty fast. We're talking minutes, not even close to an hour. Her airway was blocked, and there was congestion all over her body, especially her lungs, which had frothy fluid in them. That paints a pretty vivid picture of how her body fought, even for just a little while, to breathe. It's terrifying. But also, it just shows how fragile we all are, no matter how fast we can run or how many gold medals we've got hanging at home. Now, here's where it gets even more personal and a bit unexpected. During the deeper examination, a neuropathologist, Dr. Barbara Zayas, found something in her brain. It was this little thing called a cavernous angioma. It's basically a cluster of abnormal blood vessels, about an inch in size, that had settled in the part of her brain above her left eye, right in the zone that controls things like speech, language, and higher thinking. And here's the wild part, this thing had likely been with her since birth. It's something you're born with, and about 1 in 4 people have it. Most never even know it's there. But in Flo Jo's case, it may have been silently irritating her brain over the years, triggering those misfires that eventually became seizures. Remember when she had that seizure on a flight 2 years before she died? Yeah, that was likely a warning sign. Her family mentioned it back then, how she had to be hospitalized overnight because of it. But still, no one could figure out exactly why it happened. And let's be real, who would have thought something this serious could be hiding in the brain of an Olympic legend? What's especially important to point out here and I mean this with all the emphasis in the world, is that no banned substances or performance enhancers were found in her system. None. Just Tylenol and a bit of Benadryl. That's it. So for anyone who ever threw shade or tried to dim her light by suggesting otherwise, the science officially shuts that nonsense down. Isn't that so typical, though? A strong, successful black woman dominates a sport and suddenly people just assume she must be cheating. It's maddening. But at least now, the truth has spoken, and it's clean, it's honest, and it's tragic in the purest way. Another really heartbreaking part? This all happened while she was asleep, face down. The seizure struck silently, and because not all seizures come with those dramatic, shaking convulsions like you see in movies, no one knew. No loud warning. No flailing. Just silence. Can you imagine how scary that is? How many people suffer from epilepsy and sleep alone without even knowing they're at risk for something like this? Dr. Michael Reisinger from the Stanford Epilepsy Center said it himself, this kind of outcome is incredibly rare. But rare or not, it happened. And it happened to Flo Jo. You know what's even more mind-blowing? Through all of this, through the seizures, the congenital brain condition, the stress of fame, the intense physical pressure she probably lived under, Florence still shattered records, still inspired millions, and still moved with a level of confidence and grace that no one else has quite matched. That woman didn't just run fast, she lived fast, but with a kind of poise that made you forget the world ever tried to doubt her. You know how sometimes you hear about someone dying suddenly in their sleep and it's just so hard to wrap your head around? That was Flo Jo's case. But when the Orange County Sheriff Coroner's Office first got involved, let's just say they weren't completely buying the idea that this was just a peaceful passing. At least not at first. So here's how everything unfolded. On the morning of September 21, 1998, Al Joyner, Florence's husband, yes, the same Al Joyner who was an Olympic gold medalist too, called 911 around 7 a.m., sounding understandably frantic. When authorities showed up at their home in Mission Viejo, they noticed right away that something was off. The house was described as very cluttered and unkept, which doesn't automatically mean foul play, of course, but it definitely raised a few eyebrows. Then they found Flo Jo lying on the carpet next to the bed, face up. Just imagine that, this vibrant, strong woman, suddenly gone, lying there in such a vulnerable state. Now here's where things start to get really intense. Dr. Richard Fukumoto, the chief forensics officer, began the autopsy that same day. And within just 30 minutes, he saw some things that made him stop everything. He was so concerned by what he found that he literally called in homicide detectives. What he saw were petechial hemorrhages, tiny blood spots caused by broken capillaries, in her eyes, her neck, her cheeks, even her chest and breasts. And then there were Tardieu's spots on her chest wall too. Now, both of those are sometimes associated with strangulation. Not always, but enough to take a pause. At that point, everyone started wondering the same thing, was this really just a medical issue, or was something else going on? And then, of course, people started looking closely at Al Joyner. Not necessarily because there was any obvious evidence pointing to him, but because, well, who else was there that night? And as with any sudden death, especially one involving someone so famous, investigators had to dig deep. Al's timeline came under the microscope. He had first told authorities that he watched TV after Flo Jo went to bed, and then eventually went to bed himself after seeing her alive around 2 a.m. The things that separated her were her mental focus and toughness. Nevertheless, Joyner's autopsy indicated potential complications from human growth hormone, including oversized organs that might have led to her aneurysm. All such results were inconclusive but still threatened to mar the former Olympian's legacy and name. The matter of performance-enhancing drugs continues to come up in conversation about Joyner, and while she can't defend herself from the grave, others can. As Al Joyner said of her autopsy,